close. So, first person to die at the Boston Massacre. So the reason when I basically did the preamble about what's a patriot. So illegal immigrants can be patriots because they can actually enlist in the army and fight and die for our country when it ain't even their country. When, you know, I mean, for me, let me be clear. I may say a lot of things that sound anti-American, but I will defend to the death Turtle Island. But I make a distinction between that and the government of the United States. So I will defend the land against a foreign invader. I'll include Hawaii and Puerto Rico in that, too. Particularly Hawaii. West Maui. You got to have your prejudices, right? Your preferences. What am I going to die for? Will I die to defend a surfing beach? Hell yeah. Anyway, so who or what is a patriot? So the first person to die in the Boston Massacre was Crispus Attucks. Crispus Attucks is a black Indian, as we would call him. So he was free, black Indian. But before I get into him, this is basically a bifurcation about what is happening at the time. So, for example, this song, Amazing Grace. Those famous lyrics. So, this guy, John Newton, that is attributed to the writing of Amazing Grace, so when you basically look at the history, the origin of the melody is unknown, which means it probably didn't come from Western civilization. So most hymnals attributed to an early American folk melody, but they don't say what the folk melody is, so that could be apocryphal. So the Bill Moyer special on Amazing Grace speculated that it may have originated as a tune of a song that the slaves sang, which actually begins to make sense from an internal point of view, because what are you going to do to keep yourself alive in a slave ship? You still have to breathe. You might be moaning or whatever. You would basically sing to feel better, especially during a storm where you're going to be essentially praying for your life to whatever gods or goddesses you believe in to get us through this. So there was basically, that's what John Newton was saying, that, you know, wherever he got the melody, and if you believe, as I've observed, that nobody sings Amazing Grace like black people. Probably because it's our song. So, Newton was born in London, 1725, the son of the commander of a merchant ship, made 6 voyages with his dad. He was impressed into service. That means he was drafted into a man of war, the HMS Harwich. Finding conditions on board intolerable, he deserted but was recaptured and publicly flogged and demoted from midshipman to common seaman. At his own request, he was exchanged into service on a slave ship, which legally the British government still supported at that time, which took him to the coast of Sierra Leone. Became captain of his own slave ship. Despite early religious training from his mom, he gave up active religious practice. On a voyage home, he was attempting to steer a ship through a tremendous storm when he experienced an epiphany, his great deliverance. When all seemed lost and the ship would surely sink, he cried, "Lord, have mercy upon us." Later, he believed God had spoken to him through the storm, and grace began to work on his behalf. From the rest of his life, he observed the anniversary of May 10th, 1748 as the day of his conversion, day of humiliation, which he subjected his will to a higher power. Though some people have thought that he freed his slaves and sailed them back to Africa and left the slave trade immediately after that event. Actually, he continued for a time after his conversion, though it was said he saw to it that the slaves under his care were treated humanely. Well, how come that doesn't mean freeing them? But, my bad. So when we talk about patriotism, that, even though he was British, this has become an American song. So patriot, somebody who proudly supports or defends his or her country and its way of life, pride or devotion to the country somebody is born in or is a citizen of. So this depiction of the Boston Massacre, front and center, see this black guy, or he appears to be black guy. Crispus Attucks. So there are other historical references, but obviously when you're designing stuff online, Wikipedia is at least halfway decent. One of 5 people killed at the Boston Massacre in Boston, frequently named as the first martyr of the American Revolution, and is the only person killed in the Boston Massacre whose name is commonly remembered. Because, well, you think about that. Who else do you know from the Boston Massacre? Him. So, although little is known for certain about Attucks, including his ethnicity, the possibility that it was African American and Native American has elevated him to important symbolic status in U.S. history. Well, from the African American side and the Native American side, there's no doubt among us. I don't know who wrote this Wikipedia entry, but okay, whatever. Clearly not white. So, in the early 19th century, the 1800s, as the abolitionist movement gained momentum in Boston, he was lauded as an example of black Americans who played a historical role in the forming the United States. Because he also may have had Wampanoag ancestors, his story also holds special significance for many Native Americans, because it's the Wampanoags who made first contact with the Pilgrims as part of the first Thanksgiving, because they are known in Indian country as, among other things, the people of the Eastern Gate, one of the farthest points on Turtle Island that sees the rising sun. So when we talk about black Indians, they're native African cultural hybrids who, for various reasons, do not necessarily establish maroon settlements, but instead live among white settlements or in native post-contact contexts with their native families until expelled for political and economic reasons. So when we talk about that term, they generally blend in within either context. So talking about what it means to be a black Indian means that we both live we're Africans, we appear to be Africans, we have a touch of the inkwell, but we're also from Turtle Island. And we also often will have a mixture of European in us as well. So, okay, we're comfortable in either context. So I'd like to explain within Indian country, look, y'all weren't prepared for that smallpox blanket thing. Okay, but we knew about Trojan warfare because we were at Troy. So we understand the concept of a weapon disguised as a gift. And so in order to defuse the weapon, you have to understand that it is a weapon and how it works. So there was a native elder that talked about, there's 3 tests that came, this is not going to be on the midterm, but this is an example, right? There are 3 tests that came to native people in order: the Bible, the bottle, and the casino. Okay, that there was going to be a lot of trouble for native people with those 3 things. Okay, so taking that, well, from a black Indian analysis, those are Trojan horse weapons. Weapons disguised as gifts. So it's the King James version of the Bible they get with white Jesus instead of the African Peshitta, which was never used for conquest or slavery or anything. This is the one that says, okay, you got to become like us to get saved. And you bought that without questioning. Then there's the bottle. Oh, you never had fire water, and when you did have any form of alcohol, you said, no, we don't use this except out of ceremony. So why are you accepting whiskey? That destroys your culture, destroys your civilization, destroys your people. Don't accept that. Don't trade it for land. And the casino. Now, we had gambling before first contact. But casino is a weapon because you have to give up a piece of your sovereignty to have that particular casino, have a casino on your land, which means that you're trading away a part of your power base to do that. That's another weapon. So black Indians blend in either context, and this has actually become the connection with Oregon history will be discussed. I think I can get to it. So, in the era of exploration, many black Indians become trappers, scouts, led wagon trains, and were able to act as translators between white settlers and native nations. And we've seen that pattern in Oregon, and I'll talk about that, assuming I can get to the next, 40 minutes probably, So, within the 5 civilized tribes, so the 5 civilized tribes that's what they're called by white people. And so what do white people recognize as civilization, right? And why are these particular folks considered civilized, right? So black slaves were used as translators, for example, between the Cherokee, among others, and white civilization. So post-contact, that is after 1492, African Americans intermarried with Indians as early as the mid-17th century, so the 1600s, and easily as early as soon as an outcome of the Pequot War, and the Pequot Wars in 1636. And it was between an alliance of Massachusetts Bay and Plymouth colonies on the white side with Native American allies, the Narragansetts and Mohegan tribes, not to be confused with the Mohicans. Mohegans, they are close by, but not the same folks, against the Pequot tribe. And this war saw the elimination of the Pequot as a viable polity in what is present-day southern New England. Now, one of the reasons in terms of looking at why early Americans are targeting native nations is because of what they represent. They represent a form of democracy that's inclusive, that's one. 2, the Pequot are particularly targeted because they are like the Federal Reserve Bank of Indian country. They're the ones that are creating wampum. Now, in various economic theories, essentially money I'm fresh out of frog skins, so okay, what this is a symbol of surplus labor. Okay? Have I defined surplus labor for you? So what is it? Can't have dead air on television. Surplus labor. What you can do for yourself, gathering your own water, food, and firewood, that's basic labor. Surplus labor is anything you can trade beyond subsistence. And it becomes symbolized. And you can trade for it. So, piece of turquoise becomes, the labor used to get that, and you can trade for it if that's valuable. So, for example, in Indian country, people traded turquoise for abalone shells. Even though abalone shells can wash up, and so there's not much labor for it, dentalium you have to dive for. So dentalium becomes a form of money or currency. Cowrie shells become a form of money or currency. Wampum is a specific clam that's filed down and made into beaded belts. And the beaded belts tell a story. So the currency is history. History of peace. So that's why wampum becomes valuable. And it's the Pequots that are making wampum, and that's being used as a trade item up and down throughout 6 nations. So if you're going to attack America, where would you attack first? And you didn't need to see Live Free and Die Hard to see, when, that particular Bruce Willis movie where the hackers are going after the money first. by taking down the computer infrastructure for the money, right? So, same idea. Native nations had a complete civilization, and in order to get the land, you have to destroy the civilization using lots of different means, one of which is destroying the money system. So, many Pequot people were killed by the colonists and their allies. Even more were captured and sold into slavery in Bermuda as well as within New England. And any who escaped death, capture, or slavery were scattered. So it took the Pequot more than 3.5 centuries to regain their former political and economic power in their traditional homeland along the Pequot or present-day Thames and Mystic Rivers in what is now southeastern Connecticut, where they today have one of the largest casino complexes on the planet. Third largest on the planet. Now, bear in mind, all Indian casinos together in the United States make a profit of about $10 billion, which is not a lot of money, considering, because it's not even equally distributed, because most of that goes into the hands of white-owned management companies. So, African and natives intermarried. When escaped African slaves conspired with native peoples in the Spanish colony of Mexico, the Mexican colonies were established in the mid-16th century. Some Indians were even known to have slaves. Some tribes bought the slaves' freedom, and then the slaves resided with the Indians. There are over 15 million descendants from the African Native American intermarriage between Indians, Africans, and Europeans were quite common in the eastern seaboard and southeastern states. So you actually have the actress Heather Locklear is a descendant of, her family name means hold fast. And she comes from a tribe whose tribal identity is that we are mixed with black, native, and European. And you're holding fast to basically honor all those traditions. Obviously, the way she looks, she doesn't look like she's got much of the inkwell in her, but that is what her name means. So, Locklear, right? So there are lots of them. So, many mixed blood families were forced to choose one culture over another because of U.S. contempt for both African and American Indians, African Americans and Native Americans. Many families chose to hide their African and/or Indian heritage. Now, remember I showed you that meme about blood quantum. Part of what happened in this time was basically a divide and conquer strategy. So throughout post-contact American history, the longest and most consistent contact between American Indians and people of African descent occurred among those tribes that the federal government designated as the 5 civilized tribes: the Cherokees, Chickasaws, Choctaws, Creeks, and Seminoles. So most family history is known only by oral history. Some information can be found on the freedmen rolls of the 5 civilized tribes. So, for example, even though my dad's father's name is Hiawatha, Hiawatha is Six Nations' name. We're Choctaw. And all 8 of my great-grandparents were at least half Choctaw and black. And one of them was on the freedmen rolls, George Washington. Now, apparently, when you search the freedmen rolls, just to show you what that is, so the Dawes roll, so the movie, if you want to reference that history, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. This white guy named Dawes was basically enumerating, after the Indian Wars, all native people within certain tribes. Okay, that's called the Dawes rolls, and it's basically certification of full Indian blood. But here's what happened. Native people, who in the estimation of the white people taking the census appeared more African than Indian, they were put in what was called the darky tent. Now remember, this is happening in the 1800s, and black people had been officially mixing, not officially, but mixing with natives since the 1600s. So 200 years in some tribes. So if you're counting by what somebody looks like, and those genes can express any time, so who is it that's making the determination that you're too black to be Indian? Not the Indians. Because your skin color is not a matter of national or tribal identity. That concept, that meme didn't exist here. Okay, we note what you look like, but that is not a discriminator. So in this tent, their names were put down and all traces of their native heritage was bureaucratically erased. So the people so noted were referred to hereafter as freedmen. In other words, even if you were half native by that chart, on paper you were Negro. Right? So I have a grandfather on the freedman rolls, which gives me like 1/16th, 1/32nd. Which, you know, I could get the card if I wanted, but I don't. So, black Indians were considered fully fledged members of the tribe, within the tribe, intermarrying, voting in elections, sitting on tribal councils, and receiving tribal benefits. Lighter-skinned members, particularly those who had intermarried with whites, began to assert that black Indians or freedmen were never actually citizens and that they don't even have Native American blood. Now, they did this under pressure for the government for cash payments. You kick these people out, you get more money in your pocket. And so, for example, they would vote. So a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Cherokee could vote off, and did vote off, people who had actually lived for the tribe and lived with the tribe for hundreds of years. So when we talk about memes of race, getting back to this, so the original meme that's indigenous here is 4 races, 4 directions. Here's my pen. So the other constructs, when we get to them, three races, okay, from Blumenbach, those oids, Caucasoid, Mongoloid, and Negroid. Okay, 3 races construct. And so within the 4 races, there's no racial superiority. Notice there's a difference, but it doesn't say that East is superior to West or South is superior or inferior to North. They're equal, just different. This basically signs superiority. These people are the original people from Noah's Ark, from this spiritual truth, because it's in the Bible. Right? Because we're assuming Noah's white, and since they landed in the Caucasoid Mountains, Caucasian, then the next people to devolve from them are the Mongoloid, that is Asians, and the people that devolve from them are Negroid, but now we're not saying that they're devolved, they're just lower than us, so that's all we need to worry about. Land-based skin color. And so from the 3 races construct comes the federal 5. Plus other. Okay? Federal 5, you already check the box when you go for employment. So it goes white. What's next? Because it's in a specific order. Black. And what's in parentheses? No. Black. Non-Hispanic. You know why they do that? There are more black people in Latin America than there are in America. Let's say there are 40 million black people in America. There are 130 million in Latin America. What if you start counting black Cubans as Hispanic? What happens if you count them as Hispanic rather than black? Or wait, maybe they're black and not. Oh, this is confusing. Oh, are Brazilians Hispanic? No. Where are they? So, in any case, black, non-Hispanic, then Hispanic or Latino, then Asian, Pacific Islander, and then Native American, American Indian, Alaska Native. So the federal 5 plus other, so other is like mixed race, because Arabs are considered white. For history, look, I'm not making up the rules, I'm just saying. There's a convention and it comes from some history, though they may not acknowledge the history. The history, as I've tried to teach it to you, is right. Arabs are a mixture of black Africans and Europeans. Come up lighter skin, but still darker than Europeans, so, oh, well, we're going to acknowledge the white side rather than the black side, just like with Dawes, we're going to recognize the native side and not the black side, or the black side and not the native side. So constructs of race, basically they're artificial. Okay, and because I said that there's 5 constructs of race, 4 constructs of race, let's say. So 4 races, 3 races, federal 5, and biological. So 1 race, the human race, with variations. And the test is, of course, can you interbreed? Not make ligers or mules. So basically the point that I made, within the midterm is the idea is that it's about power. So if it's just one race, the human race, that's just straight science. No discrimination. But sometimes you make discrimination about distribution of power. So within 4 races, 4 directions, the distribution of power is equal. No race is superior to the other. And it's an indigenous construct. And it's also, I might add, before Columbus. So how do natives know about white people before Columbus? Well, others of us had contact with white people before they got here. Told them about it. Or the natives could have discovered it themselves. They had the technology to cross an ocean like we did. But that's another history for another class. So the reason I'm bringing up this politics, so right, in 83, the Cherokee tribe established a rule requiring citizens to carry a certificate of degree of Indian blood, CDIB. This is the card. This federal document is available to anyone whose ancestors are listed on the Dawes Rolls, a 1906 Indian census that excluded freedmen. So in 2000, the Seminoles expelled all 2,000 black members and denied their families a cut of the reparations money. Never mind that their ancestors had joined the tribe in the 18th century, endured the march from Florida to Oklahoma in the 1830s, their trail of tears, and have considered themselves Indian for generations. Not that some of us need that science to prove we're Indian, but. So the idea of blood quantum is a dangerous meme, which was actually where it was generated was never an idea. The idea was never to apply it to human beings. So we talk about memes already. All right, so being Native or Black Indian, not a matter of blood quantum, but experience spiritual and political inclination. So even white people do not apply blood quantum to themselves.